So for the last shot of the day, we're gonna try something a little bit different. We're up here on the roof of this house where there's this amazing daybed set on top of a field of gravel overlooking the Caribbean Sea. Earlier today, I shot one of my favorite shots of this entire trip, which is just the daybed against a field of turquoise blue, sky and sea. It just looks amazing, and we'll show you that right now. It's very simple and very powerful. I kind of wanted to try this at night. So we had the idea to come up here and shoot it under the stars and see how that would look. And our first attempts were a pretty dismal failure until we thought, what happens if we had this scene lit only by the stars and light reflecting off the clouds? That would mean I need to be at a very long exposure and we'd have to turn all of the lights of the house off. So I'll kind of show you how you work through this photo and ended up with our final image. So before we jump into this, take another look at our daytime shot. We're going to try to replicate that, but we're going to create an entirely different mood by shooting this at nighttime. So right now, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm kind of working on the staging here. I'm going to take a test shot just using the accent lights from the house. I know the light's going to be pretty ugly, but we'll take a shot and see how that looks. Okay, so this is our initial test shot. This is about a 15-second exposure, lit only by the lights behind me, the lights of the home. But I don't really think that this is the mood that we're going for. I know we can make this much, much better by turning all these lights off, and again, having all the light coming from away from the camera towards the camera. That's going to bring out some depth and texture. The only problem is it's so dark out, I know that we're going to have a very long exposure, very high ISO, because this is a tilt-shift lens. I'm stopped down to like f5.6, f8 to get that effect. One advantage of having these lights on and kind of working out our exposures right now is that we can see what we're doing. We don't have to wait 30 seconds or a minute to get results. But when I turn those off, our exposures are going to be very, very long. So I'm just going to take a minute and perfect the staging here, and then we're going to try our long exposure lit by stars and moon. So we finished staging and kept it very simple. All I have is the daybed, the gravel, and the view beyond. Very simple, very powerful. Let's turn off all the lights and take a test shot. All right, I see the beginnings of something really cool here, but our shutter speed has got to be quite a bit longer, and I'm going to bump my ISO a bit because I know there's almost no light in the sky. I'm going to try a shutter speed of 30 seconds and ISO 800, and I'll probably open up the aperture too and go to 5.6 to let more light in. Again, remember this is being lit only by the moon and stars. Okay, so this is 30 seconds, f5.6, ISO 800. I'm going to go to, I think I'm going to go into bulb mode here and keep the shutter open for about a minute. And I think that'll give us the result I'm looking for. If you've never used bulb mode before, it's really, really easy using the Cam Ranger. You set the camera to the B for bulb, and Cam Ranger just turns into basically your remote shutter, which says bulb on, bulb off. So you can push the button to open the shutter, and then whenever you're ready, push it again, and it'll close the shutter, all right here from the iPad. So let's go ahead and try about a minute-long exposure. Cam Ranger has a built-in timer, so you can see exactly how long that bulb is, and we'll see how that looks. So this is 1 minute and 8 seconds, and I think this looks amazing. I think this might be our shot. It's a bit noisy from ISO 800 and being a minute and a half long, but a quick pass of noise reduction in Lightroom will make this awesome. I'm going to add a little bit of contrast, some saturation. I love the way we have this great big softbox. There's some clouds passing over lit with the moon and stars. It acts like a big softbox, sends some soft light coming towards the camera. Even though it takes forever for the camera to pick that up, the effect is just sublime, and the whole scene is dripping with soft moonlight. I love this. So keep in mind, this trick might not work everywhere. We have a little bit of light pollution from Cozumel, maybe 10, 15 miles off the coast here. But if you're in a big city, you might get too much light pollution from tungsten or LED lights. You really have to be somewhere really dark for this to work. And all of the house lights have got to be off, because like I said, you're going to be at a minute and a half shutter speed, and any light that can leak into the camera is going to get in there and turn it kind of orange or add some funky color cast that you really want to avoid. So while we do see some stars here, the moon is a bit too bright. There's a bit too much light pollution even way off in the distance to get one of those really, really cool star trail shots with the 8-hour exposures or something. But we still can see some stars, and I really love the effect. It's kind of understated and simple, and it helps to work with the staging and composition that I've chosen. So this is just one example of kind of thinking outside the box. Just because we have all the lights, all these ProPhoto, GL1, whatever hot lights, we don't need to use them for every shot. This is a really simple picture. We kind of thought way outside of the box here, turned off all the lights of the house, and made something that I think is pretty spectacular. So this is a very unique image. My portfolio isn't going to be filled with things like this, but I think we had a great opportunity, and we had the scene to make it work. I could totally see myself out here at midnight on my laptop or reading a book, watching the stars. It's just a beautiful setting, and I thought, why not try this? In the end, we got something really, really cool, and I'm really excited to edit these. All right, so this is the last shot from our Mexico house, and I'm really excited about this. It's something totally different than what we've done before, and the real aim here is to get you thinking about different ways to capture architecture and different sources of light, rather than always having to fall back on compositing or using all kinds of different tricks and tips. This is, again, a relatively straightforward shot, but a very unique way of composing and lighting it. So this shot was really, as you saw on location, in essence lit by the moonlight kind of filtering through these clouds. Now, you can actually see as I scroll through here how the lighting in the foreground changes depending on the shape and density of the clouds above. I thought that was really, really interesting. So sometimes it gets brighter, sometimes it gets darker, and it all, again, depends on how much cloud cover there is. So we ended up settling on a shot that was lit by absolutely nothing but the moonlight. We turned off all of our practical lights, all of our exterior lights, didn't use any flash or hot light, and I think the result is totally very interesting and something completely unexpected. But again, I think it does very well to capture the mood of this house. So this is the exposure that I've chosen to edit. I just love the motion in the clouds. I love how there's not too much blur of the stars. It looks like a rather starry night, not just like, it's too dim or too dark or I left the shutter open for too long. It looks like something you would expect to see if you were out there in the middle of the night. So first things first, I'm just gonna do some quick edits here in Lightroom. I think the white balance is a little bit funky, so I know that this is a solid white, so it should be gray under that moonlight. So I'll just go ahead and sample that. And I'm gonna bump the exposure a little bit to something like this, just so it still feels dark, but it doesn't feel completely surreal or fake. If I were to push this exposure too bright, like up to almost daylight brightness, I don't think it would work. I do want to get across the point that yes, it is dark out, but I do want all those lovely, amazing blue colors in the water to kind of come through. So I'm going to go ahead and open this guy in Photoshop. This is going to be a really simple edit. You should always be looking for different ways to shoot and light your images rather than going for the same lights all the time for every shot. You should be able to deliver something different and improvise a little bit, think outside the box. Okay, so this is honestly a relatively straightforward and boring edit. The magic of this shot was in the way we captured it. All that I'm really going to do here is clone out. I just want to make this perfectly symmetrical. I'm just going to clone out the seam in the bed. I'm going to pull these trees out. Again, those sort of dead palm trees, they look okay when there's a bunch of them, but one of them on the left-hand side looks a little bit funky. So I'm just going to create a new clone layer. Going to use my gradient trick here just to clean this up a bit. And use a little mask to blend it in seamlessly. All right, looking good there. Now let's go ahead and take care of this tree. This might be a little bit trickier. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just see if I can copy this pane here. But first I want to clean it up a bit. So I'm just going to get rid of that, anything sort of poking into this pane here. Again, nothing groundbreaking, but in order to keep this as natural as possible, we'll go ahead and clean this up. All right, now I'm going to copy that, paste it. Maybe I'll flip it so it's a little bit different than the one on the right. And I will skew that to match. All right, that looks pretty good. Now I just want to get rid of this, whatever's down the middle here. So make a selection so that I can find my clone to that area. I'll hide it. I'm going to grab this edge right here. And let's see if I can just get sneaky with this. Yes, we can. Awesome. All right. I'm going to tighten that up and make this a little more realistic. Clone in some of that edge, just like that. That should look really good. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, let's see. Now, I feel like this is a little funky down here. So I'm just going to mask out that bottom where it's flipped. So I keep those seams in the concrete perfectly lined up. And lastly, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of this palm tree fro, if you will. That's poking up over the top. And that, I think, will just be a matter of a nice big soft brush. Going to confine that clone, constrain it so it doesn't go over my new pane of glass there. And just gently paint away that treetop. All right. Lastly, I think maybe there's some like streaks and reflections that I see that bug me. I think this is actually my iPad screen right there. So I'm just going to blast that out as well. And I'll go ahead and get rid of some of this streakiness in the glass. Some of this just looks like reflections from that island. That's actually Cozumel across the strait there. And some of it's the house. You can actually see the curtains over here. So I don't think that's the end of the world. I don't want to kill all the reflections. If I got rid of this here, it would definitely, you would not really register this as glass. So I think I'm okay with leaving that. I don't mind seeing the house in there so much. So the last thing I'm going to do, this is looking really cool. I'm going to Command-Alt-Shift-E to flatten all to a new layer. I'm going to make sure everything is nice and horizontal. Again, I was composing this almost entirely in the dark, so I could be off by a little bit. Looks like it might need a tiny skew. Something like that is all it's going to take, and we'll back out and hit enter. And I'm going to save this, and it's going to pop open in Lightroom. Again, if you're using Lightroom and you integrate it with Photoshop, you can go back and forth really quickly. And the last things I'm going to do to finish this shot, I'm going to add a little bit of clarity, and I'm just going to add a little bit of noise reduction because I did shoot this at ISO 800, 30 seconds. It is a little bit noisy, as you can see here, but just with a little smidge of noise reduction, it cleans up very nicely. And again, this is like a 50 megapixel file, so it's amazing resolution. And you might want to sharpen it just a tad if you're running some noise reduction, but I'm not a big sharpening fan. But that's going to finish our shot. Again, I think that is a really cool, very different shot, different than anything we've delivered before. I love how we lit it. I love the kind of creativity that we had coming up with it, and I love the mood that it conveys. So I'm super happy with that one. Okay, so that was the last lesson of this tutorial, and we covered a huge amount of ground. It may take a while for it all to sink in. I highly suggest you go back and rewatch and practice. I know it took me tons and tons, years of practice to get to where I am. So hopefully you picked up a lot of new tricks along the way, things that you might not have ever thought about before, and new post techniques that might have helped refine where you are with your photography. The fastest way to learn these are probably through repetition. I remember when I was first starting out, I used to do all these real estate gigs. I'd stay up until like 1 or 2 in the morning and just repeat over and over and over the same things until I had it totally committed to memory. So I hope this tutorial gives you a nice shortcut to those techniques which could have taken you years to figure out entirely on your own.